Now we're going to talk about ionic compounds. This is a fairly big topic, quite a bit going on in your assignment regarding ionic compounds. So I'm going to make a couple of different videos about this. To start off with, the definition of an ionic compound is a positive ion combined with a negative ion. In other words, something with a positive charge is going to combine with something with a negative charge. Now, these ions could be an element that ended up having a positive or negative charge, or it could be a group of elements that combined together have a positive or negative charge. The groups of elements we will address in another video. I just want to draw your attention back to the periodic table where I mentioned that everything on the left side of the table, I say left side, left and center, are metals, and everything on the right side are nonmetals. So an ionic compound will typically be something from this left side combined with something from the right side. Just a quick note before we get started with the examples. I only picked metals or positive ions that just have a single ionic charge. The reason for this is these questions are a bit simpler to answer than the questions that involve multiple ionic charges like you see on iron there. The metals with multiple ionic charges are known as multivalent metals. I mentioned this in the previous video, and naming ionic compounds using those I will address in the next video as it is a little bit more complicated process. Time for some examples of writing ionic compounds. Here you see three different chemical formulas: Ag2O, SrBr2, and Sc2S3. On your assignment, you will see many questions like this where they'll give the chemical formula and you have to write the proper name for it. In each of these examples, I've taken an element from the metal side of the periodic table and an element from the non-metal side of the periodic table. In the first one, if you do your little scavenger hunt through the metals, you'll find that Ag means silver. And if you do the scavenger hunt through the non-metal side, you'll find that O means oxygen. Once you know what the elements are, you can write out the name. So it's pretty straightforward. It's silver and oxygen. Except there is one final snag to this. When we are naming ionic compounds, as well as another type of compound later on, covalent compounds, the second element in the name actually has to have its name changed. Rather than writing it out as it is shown on the periodic table, the ending of the second element actually gets erased and changed to IDE. If this is confusing, don't worry. It does take a bit of practice before you can easily recognize what part of the name you have to take out and replace with IDE. At the end of this video, I'll put up a reference guide for some of the more common element names and what they change into once you take away part of them and add IDE. But for now, let's look at the next example. SrBr2. So again, scavenger hunt through the periodic table. You'll find that Sr means strontium, and Br is bromine. So when writing out the actual name, that will be strontium bromine. So right now I have not made the change to the IDE at the end. I will do that now. For bromine and a lot of the other ones that end in INE, it'll change to IDE. So now we have strontium bromide. And the final example here, I won't write down the extra names right now. SC is scandium, and S is sulfur. Except with the name change, sulfur becomes sulfide. And as promised, here is a bit of a reference guide to how to spell that second element with IDE on the end. The ones like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, selenium, arsenic have different endings to their words. So I did the different examples of what they would look like with IDE on the end. And then on the right, the ones that end in INE, like chlorine and fluorine. There's a few other elements that end in INE. Those ones are pretty straightforward. Just swap out the INE for IDE. Now remember that this is not the entire guide to how to name ionic compounds. There's a little bit more work that we will have to do with some special cases, which I will get into in a future video.